Hanafi School. The Hanafi School is the oldest surviving Sunni legal school, and by some estimates, the most widely followed legal tradition in the world today, covering roughly a third to nearly half of all Sunni Muslims. It was founded by Imam Abu Hanifa, born in Kufa, Iraq, around 699 CE, in one of the most cosmopolitan cities of the early Islamic world. That urban environment matters because it shaped everything about how the school thinks. Kufa was a melting pot of cultures, religions, and legal problems that nobody had faced before, and Abu Hanifa's response was to lean heavily on reason, analogical deduction known as qiyas, and independent legal opinion known as rai, alongside the Quran and Hadith. The result was a school unusually comfortable with novel legal questions. Today it dominates Turkey, South Asia, Central Asia, and the Balkans, and it forms the legal backbone of hundreds of millions of people's religious practice, from a Pakistani farmer's inheritance rules to an Ottoman imperial court's criminal code. Maliki School. The Maliki School emerged from a completely different environment, and that difference is its defining feature. Founded by Imam Malik ibn Anas in Medina around the mid-8th century CE, the school rests on a premise as simple as it is bold. The people of Medina, the city where the Prophet lived, prayed, and governed, preserved his actual practice in their daily lives, generation after generation, like a living hadith. Malik compiled this insight into Al-Muwatta, one of the earliest systematic collections of Islamic law and prophetic tradition, written around 770 CE. Wherever it spread, which included North Africa, West Africa, and the courts of medieval Andalusia in Muslim Spain, it carried that Medinan conservatism with it. The school is methodologically careful, resistant to pure rationalist speculation, and deeply rooted in the idea that authentic practice, passed down through living communities, carries legal weight that no textbook argument can override. Shafi School. If Hanafi built the house, and Maliki furnished it with tradition, Shafi'i drew the architectural blueprints that made all later construction possible. Imam Muhammad ibn Idris al-Shafi'i, born around 767 CE, was himself a student of Imam Malik in Medina before eventually breaking new ground entirely. His landmark work, the Risala, written around 820 CE, is widely considered the first formal treatise on Islamic legal theory, Usul al-Fiqh, essentially inventing the systematic framework that every subsequent school of law, including the ones that came before it, would be retroactively analyzed through. Al-Shafi'i struck a deliberate middle path between the Hanafi confidence in reason and the Maliki attachment to Medinan practice, insisting that the hadith of the Prophet carried binding legal authority even beyond Medina. The school today dominates Egypt, East Africa, and Southeast Asia, including Indonesia, the single most populous Muslim country on earth, home to well over 200 million Muslims. Hanbali School. The Hanbali School is the most scripturally conservative of the four major Sunni legal schools, and its founder paid a physical price for that conviction. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, born in Baghdad in 780 CE, was deeply suspicious of rationalist legal reasoning, and especially of using Greek-influenced philosophy to resolve theological questions. His position put him on a collision course with the Abbasid Caliphate during the Mihna, an inquisition that ran roughly from 833 to 848 CE, during which state-backed Mutazalite theologians demanded that scholars declare the Quran to be a created, not eternal object. Ibn Hanbal refused. He was imprisoned and flogged. He still refused. That stubbornness made him a symbol of traditional Sunni resistance, and his school, which prioritizes Quran and Hadith above rational speculation, remained a minority tradition for centuries until the 18th century, when it became the theological foundation for a revolutionary alliance in the Arabian Peninsula that would reshape the modern world. Mutazalism. Mutazalism is the great rationalist experiment of early Islamic theology, and for about 20 years it was the official intellectual position of one of the most powerful empires on earth. Emerging from Basra and Baghdad in the 8th century CE, The Mutazalites believed that reason was not merely a tool for understanding revelation, but a primary source of truth in its own right. They argued the Quran was created in time, not eternal, that God by his very nature cannot do evil, and that human beings possess genuine free will. All positions derived from Greek logical frameworks applied to Islamic theology. Abbasid caliphs al-Ma'mun and al-Mutasim backed these positions as state doctrine during the Mihna from approximately 827 to 848 CE, attempting to impose them by force. That experiment collapsed, but Mutazalism never fully disappeared. Its intellectual legacy seeded centuries of Islamic philosophy, and traces of neo-Mutazalite thinking continue surfacing in modern Islamic reform movements. Asherism. Asherism is the school that answered Mutazalism, and it did so from the inside. Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari, born around 874 CE, was himself trained as a Mutazalite before making a dramatic, reportedly very public break with the school, announcing from a mosque pulpit, according to tradition, that he was abandoning rationalist theology without abandoning rational argument. The distinction matters enormously. Asherism does not reject reason. It uses reason rigorously, but insists that revelation holds final authority in all ultimate questions about God's nature. The Quran, in Ash'ari theology, is eternal in its essence, but expressed through created human language, a careful compromise that diffused the most explosive theological controversy of the era. The school became the dominant theological framework of Sunni Islam. Al-Azhar University in Cairo, founded in 970 CE, and still the most prestigious institution in Sunni Islamic learning, operates within an Ash'ari framework. So does virtually every major Sunni seminary, from Morocco to Malaysia. Maturidism. Maturidism is Asherism's parallel school, its close twin and occasional rival, and it is dramatically underappreciated in Western scholarship relative to its actual reach. Founded by Abu Mansur al-Maturidi in Samarkand, in present-day Uzbekistan, around the early 10th century CE, the school shares most of Asherism's conclusions, but arrives at a few of them differently. Maturidists grant slightly more independent weight to reason in the realm of ethics, holding that humans can, without revelation, recognize certain basic moral truths. That is a small, but philosophically significant difference. What made Maturidism enormous in scale was geography. It became the official theological companion of the Hanafi legal school, and so, wherever Hanafi jurisprudence traveled, which included the entire Ottoman Empire, spanning from 1299 to 1922 CE, maturity theology traveled with it. Hundreds of millions of Muslims across Turkey, Central Asia, and South Asia have practiced within a Hanafi maturity framework, without most of them ever learning that combination had a name. Twelver Shia Islam. Twelver Shia Islam is the largest branch of Shia Islam and a complete civilization in its own right, with its own theology, legal school, sacred geography, and calendar of mourning and commemoration. Twelvers believe that the Prophet Muhammad was succeeded by 12 divinely appointed imams, beginning with his cousin and son-in-law Ali ibn Abi Talib, and that leadership of the Muslim community was never legitimately transferred to the caliphs who ruled in historical fact. Their legal tradition, called Ja'fari fiqh, was codified by the sixth imam, Ja'far al-Sadiq, who lived from approximately 702 to 765 CE, and whose legal and theological teachings form the jurisprudential core of the school. The 12th Imam, Muhammad al-Mahdi, is believed to have entered a state of occultation, a hidden presence, in 874 CE, and is expected to return at the end of times. Today, Twelver Shia Islam is dominant in Iran, Iraq, Azerbaijan, and Bahrain, with significant communities across Lebanon, Pakistan, and India. Ismaili Islam. Ismaili Islam split from the Twelver tradition over a single dynasty-defining question. Who was the rightful seventh Imam? When Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq died in 765 CE, Ismailis recognized his son Ismail, who had predeceased him, through Ismail's son Muhammad ibn Ismail, rather than following the line that led to the Twelver succession. That divergence produced a tradition with a distinct intellectual character, emphasizing esoteric interpretation, the idea that every outward religious text contains a hidden, symbolic inner meaning accessible through the living Imam. The most spectacular historical expression of Ismaili power was the Fatimid Caliphate, which ruled from 909 to 1171 CE, founded Cairo in 969 CE, and established Al-Azhar, which began as an Ismaili institution before later becoming the center of Sunni learning. Today, the largest Ismaili community, the Nizari branch, is led by the Aga Khan, a living hereditary imam with global communities concentrated across East Africa, South Asia, and Central Asia. Zaydi Islam. Zaydi Islam is the oldest of the Shia schools, and, theologically, the one most difficult to distinguish from Sunni Islam at first glance. It takes its name from Zayd ibn Ali, grandson of Hussein, who launched an armed revolt against the Umayyad Caliphate in 740 CE and was killed in the attempt. Unlike Twelvers, Zaydists do not believe in a hidden or infallible imam. Their imam must be a living, publicly active leader who asserts his rights, is descended from Ali and Fatima, and is willing to fight for justice. That is a doctrine built for the mountains, and the mountains of northern Yemen became Zaydism's heartland. The Zaydi imamate in Yemen endured, with significant interruptions, from the 9th century until the Republican Revolution of 1962, making it one of the longest surviving Islamic political institutions in history. Yemen's contemporary Houthi movement draws from a Zaydi background, though its ideology extends well beyond classical Zaydi jurisprudence and theology. Sufism. Sufism is not a separate sect, but a spiritual path running through the interior of Islam, ancient in its roots and vast in its reach, and it is arguably the single most important vehicle through which Islam actually spread across the world. Emerging formally in the 8th and 9th centuries CE, Sufism, known in Arabic as tasawwuf, centers on the purification of the self, the direct experiential knowledge of God, and love as the animating force of religious life. It organizes itself into orders called tariqas, among them the Qadiri, Naqshbandi, Chishti, Shadhili, and the Mevlevi, the order of whirling dervishes founded by the followers of Jalal al-Din Rumi after his death in 1273 CE. The scholar Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, born 1058 CE, performed the intellectual feat of reconciling Sufi spirituality with Sunni legal orthodoxy in his monumental work Ihya Ulum al-Din, written around 1095 CE. Wandering Sufi teachers, not armies, were primarily responsible for Islamization across sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. Wahhabism and Salafism. Wahhabism and Salafism are related but distinct, frequently conflated, and probably the most globally consequential Islamic intellectual movements of the past 3 centuries. Wahhabism was founded by Muhammad ibn Abd al-Wahhab, born in the Najd region of Arabia in 1703, who argued that over a millennium of Islamic civilization had been corrupted by innovation, saint veneration, and tomb worship, and that a return to the Quran and authenticated hadith interpreted with strict literalism was the only valid path. In 1744 CE, he forged a political alliance with the tribal chief Muhammad ibn Saud, a pact whose descendants created the modern Saudi state. Salafism is a broader global movement, sharing the methodological emphasis on emulating the Salaf, the first 3 generations of Muslims, without always sharing Wahhabism's specific Arabian political context. After the 1973 oil embargo dramatically expanded Saudi wealth, Wahhabi Salafi literature, mosques, and schools were funded across the globe on a scale that reshaped Islamic practice from Indonesia to West Africa. The movement is internally diverse, ranging from quietist scholars who avoid politics entirely to a small but notorious jihadist fringe whose ideology represents a radical departure from the classical tradition. If you want to see more, click the video on screen now